As the saying goes, education is power. So, Donald Trump's latest move this week to try and reverse the last 70 years of progress in this country as it pertains to education is indeed about not only the dumbing down of America, but it is also about the absolute whitewashing of America. It is extraordinary and it is happening in real fucking time. And when I say that education has consistently been on the front line for justice, this is what I mean. This recent executive order, and I'm sure 17,000 came out since then, but this recent executive order on attacking our American education institutions, this is not just the distraction. This is the whole kit and caboodle. Are you ready, dear friends? Buckle up. It's time for the Danielle Moodie Show. Let's get into it. I just saw in the comments that someone said, I am sick to death and like sick in bed today, just feeling shitty. I will tell you, friends, that today has been a struggle day for me, as I know that I am not alone. But I will tell you that as a former educator, and for those, again, who don't necessarily know my full story, my full career story, and are just discovering me here and think that I just turned on a microphone and this is the only thing that I've ever done, is I was an educator. Have a master's degree in early childhood education. Went and worked on Capitol Hill to do what? Federal education policy. Also, lobbied on behalf of the National Wildlife Federation, doing environmental education policy. I believe that education is, in fact, the great equalizer. And it is why it's always been in this country on the front lines for justice. And so when you see this week Donald Trump's latest executive order, which is essentially waging war on our education institutions, it hit me like deeply in my heart, because education is the reason why I went into politics. It is the reason why I went to school in the greater Washington, D.C. area. It's the reason why, right? I've done so many things in my life because of the teachers and the professors that I've had, that have encouraged me to think critically, to expand my mind. And this war that MAGA is waging on education is to narrow us, is to narrow our children, is to make them believe, right, that anyone that is not white, that is not male, that is not cis, has never offered a damn thing to this country. That where you are currently is where you're always going to be. And so if you can squash people's possibility, right, which I believe is our greatest American value, it is the possibility of the thing. If you can squash people's possibility, if you can narrow their thinking, if you can, on top of that, then make them fearful of what they don't know, and then ensure that they never know more than what's in front of them, well, then you can control them. And they will believe everything that you say because, again, critical thinking is something that is taught, just as well as racism. So today, we start off. I am going to, and I see, friends, that there are a number of trolls in the chat. And I am going to do my best, along with our wonderful moderators, to try and push them out. But I really do not want you to be distracted by trolls that are in here. Be in conversation if you are in the chat and you are live with people who you want to be in conversation with. But I am going to do my best to try and keep an eye on what is happening over here, as well as doing the show. And so thank you to the moderators who I know consistently have their, hands full. So yes, so please, I'm going to put this up. Susan says to tag her. If you are seeing trolls, tag her so that she can do the best that she can to get them. And again, I will do the best that I can as well to try and get them. So, all right. I digress. They were a fucking distraction. Let's get back on track. So let's start at Brown versus the Board of Education, shall we? I realized when I was putting together today's show, Brown versus the Board of Education was 70 years ago. 70 years ago. And while I'd like to say that there has been substantial progress made in terms of the integration of our schools, in all honesty, there are too many states and cities around the country that still have not reached what Thurgood Marshall fought for and won with Brown versus the Board of Education, because it is one thing to win a case. It is another thing for it to actually be instituted. And where America consistently has issues is implementation, is consistency, and then follow up. And so I saw this, and folks, like, look at this picture. This is a Black woman and her child on the steps of the Supreme Court. This is 1954, right? High Court banned segregation in public schools. And segregation, as we know, lasted in this country for, 100 years. Desegregation lawsuits, however, still remain 70 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. Like, I just want you to think about that as we are bracing ourselves for yet another fight on school grounds to ensure that our children learn the truth, that they receive not just one whitewashed perspective of America, but that they understand, right, the complex history of America. You see, MAGA would have you believe that by actually teaching people the truth, that somehow, as Ron DeSantis has been known to say, it's teaching white kids to hate themselves. Why is always the assumption that if you teach children the truth, that they are going to hate themselves, as opposed to teaching them in a way of America has come very far. We still have a long way to go, but like, you can be part of that continued progress. No, it is instead MAGA's desire that we just lie to American children and we continue to tell them that the only success that they can have is in their proximity to whiteness, that to actually learn about, the person that created the drone, or the person that created the stoplights, or the person that created the cotton gin, or go beyond a whitewashed version of Martin Luther King, that if you were to teach that there are innovators and engineers that came, right, and helped to develop America, that they weren't just white men, then all of a sudden, what would happen? White kids' heads would explode, right? Or what you actually fear happening is that then you start to ask critical questions as to why certain people are barred from certain access and opportunity. And so when I see this, when I saw this headline, that there are still cases that remain 70 years after this decision, I'm just like, Donald Trump is really just coming to finish the job, right? And so, here we say the plaintiffs argued that state sanctioned segregation of public schools on the basis of race was a violation of the 14th Amendment and therefore unconstitutional. That was the decision in Brown versus the Board of Education. So here we have, so there are cases that came into being as a result of Brown versus the Board of Education that continue to be litigated today. There are still school districts that are under federal court jurisdiction, and they're being supervised to make sure that they cure the original constitutional violation of operating what they refer to here as a biracial school system, meaning that there were schools for white children and then there were schools for non-white children. Turnage Young said. But now there are concerns that we could be facing a sort of segregation 2.0. Now, let me bring this up to say that New York City, right, for as diverse of a city as New York is, with 8 million people that live in New York City, our school system here, the public school system, is probably one of the most complicated and, I would say, in a very inarticulate way, fucked kind of system to navigate as a parent and as a caregiver. The reason being, right, is that, again, your quality of school is based on the tax bracket in which you live in, right? The geography, right? You can afford more, right? Chances are you're going to be in a better school district. I remember my mother telling me when I was very young, I had asked her why my parents at the time had moved so far out east on Long Island, which is where I grew up, which is largely, when I was growing up, 96 to 98% white. And I asked my mom, why would you move to a place where, like, literally in my graduating class of 1,100 kids, there were 10 Black kids. 10. Okay. Why you would move to this space? And she said, I moved, right? We moved out here because it was the best school district we could afford. Because that's how America is designated and laid out. You afford, right, the best house, the best condo, the best space that you can get. And based on that is going to be the quality of school that you attend. So in New York City, for instance, right, they've set up magnet programs for different skill sets that kids need to test into. And we know about standardized testing and how standardized testing can oftentimes, right, test people out of being into certain elite schools and settings. So whereas New York can say, oh, well, we have a very diverse student population, but when you're looking at the magnet schools, it's actually filled with white and Asian kids as opposed to Black and brown children. The Black and brown children are concentrated into low income schools, right? So again, you create these different hierarchies in our education system, whether it's magnet, whether it's charter, whether it's this, that, or the other. But the reality is that regardless, it is still going to be based on race and wealth. And so while there was indeed, right, desegregation of schools, in reality, on paper, you can walk into a number of schools across the country, cities, rural, what have you, and still see a very significant racial breakdown based on your class, which is usually tied to, right, your race in a lot of ways. Do you see what I'm saying? So here we have, throughout the last 70 years, programs that have been put in place in order to create equity in a system that was never created to actually educate to the same extent of white children, Black children, and children of color. You had affirmative action, right? Looking at the ways in which you can create equity in an unjust system that prioritized the hiring and the admission of white students. So now the Supreme Court rolls that back. But that's not enough, right? Because they say, oh, well, now white students and Asian students are being discriminated against because you're prioritizing admission to these predominantly white institutions, or PWIs, trying to equalize them based on looking at not just test scores, but looking at the full experience. Because let me tell you something, that a Black child, right, a Black student coming from a low income area that manages not only to test into that school, but has a range of understanding about life and has had way more challenges to get into that space, should be considered higher than those that had no obstacles at all, but have the same. If I'm looking at a resume, I'm looking at admissions letters, and one child had tutors and all the things given to them, went to the best schools and had, a wonderful essay, because guess what? They've had a tutor and they had SAT prep classes and all of these things that their parents were able to pay for. And I'm looking at another student that has had poverty and, racial injustice and all of these other issues that they've had to manage through, but were able to get to this entrance of the same door, but only one of them can get through. You're telling me the one that has been able to persevere through obstacle and still manage to have the scores to get in, there shouldn't be a second look and a third look that applicant should have? Is fucking nuts to me. But this is now where we are back. We're back to square one, because the Trump administration, Project 2025, has seen what we have always known. Education is power, and it provides possibility where there is none. And if you wipe away, right, specific loans and grants that were created to allow for there to be more equity in our educational systems, both K through 12 and higher ed, if you wipe that away and we go back to square one, their assumption is, oh, well, then white kids will be back on top. Well, if you were so exceptional to begin with, then you shouldn't have to create obstacles for everybody else. That's a story for another day. So here's where we are now with this executive order that Donald Trump puts out, right? The whole goal, and has always been the goal of the Republican Party with their privatization and their charter schools, has always been to disrupt the public education system in which 90% of American children are educated through. They know that if they defund, right, our education system under the guise of racial inequality, because white people now all of a sudden are the ones that are being discriminated against. And so we have to do away with all programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion in order to equal the playing ground that, by the way, I just said from the beginning, we are 70 years post the Brown versus Board of Education, and we still have not reached educational equity in this country. So if now they can wipe away any of the progress that was made over the 20th century, then we go back to square one. So this is Donald Trump's goal. Education Department has now give schools 2 weeks to eliminate race-based programs. The department's Office for Civil Rights, which give me a fucking break, warned that it would penalize schools that consider race in scholarships, hiring, and an array of other activities. I want folks to understand what that array of other activities looks like. It looks like the Black Student Alliance. It looks like the Asian Student Alliance. It looks like a women's club or feminist club. It looks like fraternities and sororities on campuses, right? It looks like any type of, again, think about your own college experience. For those of you who attended university, think about the enrichment in which you received through not just the classes that you were able to attend for your major, but all the other experiences that would have you meet and connect with people outside of your race, your sexual orientation, your gender, your religion, your geographical location of birth. Think about the experience that college provides you with. And this is exactly what they are going after. So, the education department warned schools in a letter, and this was from Friday, that they risked losing federal funding if they continue to take race into account when making scholarships or hiring decisions, or so much as nodded to race in all other aspects of student, academic, and campus life. Folks, this is taking the 2023 decision to end affirmative action, which, by the way, has seen an absolute decrease in Asian students accepted into schools, which is funny because the person that brought the affirmative action case that went all the way to the Supreme Court that got rid of affirmative action was Asian, right? So now Asian students are being admitted less. Black students are being admitted less to higher education programs. But now those that are there, they are going to do what DeSantis did in Florida, which is why I continue to have said that Florida and Texas were petri dishes for the Republican Party to see how this could be nationalized, how their white nationalism could be nationalized. FYI, Google it, but Florida's literacy rates, Florida's math scores, Florida's graduation rates in the fucking toilet. You can Google that. They are in the toilet and have been on a decline since DeSantis has been governor. Because, to DSW's point, brain drain. Because what is going to happen, folks? What's going to happen is that, one, for those people, again, it's going to be the breakdown of wealth and class. For those people that can afford to say, you know what? I can't send you to school in these United States. There's nowhere for you to attend where you're going to get the robust education. So you're going to see people applying abroad, those that can actually afford it, right? Sending their kids into other institutions. Because what kind of society are we creating here? What their goal is a permanent underclass. Ron DeSantis said back when he was rolling back all of the education incentives, what did he say? Oh, we need to get back to the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Bitch, are you living in the 21st century or not? Are you trying to create children and students that are globally competitive or no? Or are you just trying to create what? The widgets and things person that is just standing on an assembly line. And I mean no disrespect to those that work in factories and assembly lines. They are needed. But we also have to understand that America doesn't really produce shit anymore and hasn't. Again, for decades upon decades. Why? Because Republicans gave tax breaks to companies that took their businesses and found cheaper labor that didn't have to be concerned with workers' protections and workers' rights in places like China, in places like Mexico, you know, all of the places where Donald Trump wants to tariff outside of Canada. Those places, Mexico, China, and others, do not have workers' protections and rights. So you don't have to worry about paying those people health insurance, right? Or life insurance or doing anything like that. So it became cheaper for companies to manufacture their goods abroad. But if you're no longer creating mines that are going to compete with the China, with Europe, if you're no longer creating the critical thinking skills and investing in the classes and the subjects that are going to be the industries of the future, then what you're doing is purposeful in creating a permanent underclass, which is what an oligarch needs to survive. And in America, that underclass has always been melanated people, Black people, and then other people of color. Oh, and it doesn't stop there, right? Because Donald Trump's attacks are not just on Black students and students of color and race-based. They also want to do away with anything that has been done to create more equity in schools for children with disabilities, for students with disabilities. So any accommodations that have been made, do away with. Targeting of gay student alliances and, again, trans groups, all of these things are wrapped up into this whitewashing, ciswashing, hetero-washing of our education system. And what? And just again, let me connect the dots. Why is that? One, like I said at the top, because education is power. And if you take power and possibility away from people, you make them easier to control. Number two, Gen Z, the younger generation that's now graduating from college and entering into the workforce, they are more conscious, more diverse, more sexually fluid, right, than any other prior generation. And what are their parents blaming that on? Education. They just got too fucking woke. I sent them away to college and now they want me to refer to them as they, them. So instead of it being an opportunity for older generations to expand their minds and ask critical questions as to why we've just kind of moved inside of a binary, instead of being open to other people, they're like, oh no, we need to dead this altogether. Because this whole they, them, this whole like consciousness, wokeness is too much. And again, just a reminder that wokeness is consciousness, which means that you are educated, right? And what they prefer are people that are dumb and asleep. So when you look at these scenarios, when you take them as silos as opposed to connecting the dots, then it seems as if they're all one-offs, but they all connect back to white nationalism and fascism. It is, it's really sickening. So the letter, right? This continues on from the New York Times. The letter was the latest step in the Trump administration's push to recast programs intended to level the playing field for historically underserved populations as a form of racial discrimination. It also appeared to be an extension of the broadsides President Trump has delivered to purge diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from the federal government, which critics have assailed as veiled racism. News fucking flash. It ain't veiled. Okay? Like anyone, and I mean the media, that wants to pretend that this is anything other than racism, right? And the fact that the media doesn't even question them on why do you think that diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a bad thing? Like, what is it about including those that have been historically denied access to the table. Why is that a bad thing? The media has never, corporate media has never put MAGA on their heels with even asking that fucking question and listening to the response. They just let them go ahead, say what they're going to say. And right now, I got a note today from my colleague, one of my colleagues who sent a poll, the latest poll, and I want to read it to you guys because I was just like out fucking done. So the latest poll, a Quinnipiac poll that came out, and you guys know how much I cannot stand polling. A new Quinnipiac poll said that 53% of Americans think that Donald Trump's DEI policies are a good thing. 53% believe that him getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a good thing. I nearly threw my phone because I was just like, so what that says to me, right, is that 53% of Americans are wildly racist. That's what that means. That means that, and I used to think, folks, and let me say this. I used to think that people thought this way because they didn't know any better. And so, like I said at the top, I made it my goal, my career, to try and educate people. First, I started in the school system with young children because I'm like, if you can just get children young to start critically thinking, right? And be curious, because that's what critical thinking is, friends. It is about having curiosity about the world around you. We live in this great big world. And MAGA wants you to operate from this narrow place of scarcity. They don't want you to be curious. They just want you to do what you're fucking told to do and not question. So if you can, again, get people into a small, scared place, then they'll never question you. They'll be too scared to do so. So right now, it is about denying public schools federal funding if they don't start to say that slavery didn't exist. Right? And if it did, as Ron DeSantis or as the Texas school bookmaker wanted you to believe, oh, it was like a glorified internship. Ron DeSantis said, the enslaved, well, they learned skills. No, they were human beings that were skilled, that brought those skills to the fucking United States. You know, so again, all of this is a ruse. You need a permanent underclass to have a successful oligarch. Plain and simple. And if you don't believe that Black and brown people offer anything other than cheap labor, then the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs makes sense to you. Because you see, people do know better. They've actually just decided not to act on it. And that is why Donald Trump is the 47th president of the United States. It's not because there was a failure of education, right, on racism. No, it's just that I want people who don't look like me, love like me, think like me, pray like me to have less. And when they have less than I have, I feel like I have more. Lyndon B. Johnson, if you can teach the poorest white man that he is better than the best Black man or colored man, as he said at that time, you can pick his pockets. Right? And that's what the Republican Party has been doing for centuries at this point. And yet it's always an aha. Oh, what are they really doing? Is, and so then they have us get caught up in the fuckery of defending. Oh, did Elon Musk give a Nazi salute? Is it Nazi salute at 90 degrees? Is it at 50 degrees? Bitch, that's not what we should be arguing about. Is it the Gulf of America? Is it the Gulf of Mexico? That's what we should be having conversations about, as opposed to the absolute ransacking of America, our data, the whitewashing that is happening at the hands of white nationalists. Like, give me a break. That shit is a distraction. It keeps you, right? As Toni Morrison said, racism is a distraction because it keeps you having to explain who you are and your worth and your value over and over again. So I have to go back and forth with these motherfuckers about whether or not it's the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America. I got to go back and forth with you about whether or not what a Nazi sign looks like, as opposed to talking about the dangers of Nazism and how it is now in this country, how we're not backsliding or sliding into fascism, how we have arrived head fucking first in it. This is the shit that honestly drives me insane. And it is why today I woke up and I was like, what am I even doing? Right? Because I have these moments, just like all of you, where I'm like, I need not waste my time trying to connect the dots for people that are committed to not understanding. They are so committed to their racism. They don't care if they are hurt, so long as other people are hurt more. So how can you have civil and rational conversations? You can't. Because the time for civility has long since passed us. But I just want folks, those of you who give a damn, to actually see the bigger picture here. Because you can get caught up in all of the bullshit, because that's the point. And I was going to go on into a whole different topic. But I see where the time is, so I'm trying to make a split decision as to whether or not I'm going to go there. But let me go there for a hot minute. So, speaking of the diversity, equity, and inclusion fuckery, right? So this is the picture of the plane that crash landed in Toronto, right? And we know, I don't know if you all had your alerts on today, but there was another plane crash today. Small plane, I believe it was in Arizona, right? Folks, I don't know, because I it's one of those situations where I'm like, are more plane crashes happening, or are they covering it more? Right? Like, I can't figure it out. But I do know that we were not having this problem before. But I also do know that when the crash happened, right, at DCA, the horrible crash that cost, I think it was, close to 70 people their lives, the helicopter that crashed into the plane, right? What was the first response to that?
Yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's unacceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again.
And by reforms, he meant to make sure that there were no DEI pilots, right? Because that was his thing. No DEI pilots, no diversity, equity, and inclusion pilots, right? Like that was, I'm going to institute the reforms that Donald Trump set out. Mind you, I told you a couple of weeks ago on the Danielle Moodie show, 90%, 92 actually, percent of pilots in this country are white men. 92%. So what's funny to me, and not funny, haha, Brian Tyler Cohen, right? Incredible YouTuber, an analyst, right? He put together a list. And here's the list of what has happened at the FAA since Donald Trump took office. January 20th, Trump guts the FAA. January 22nd, Trump disbands the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, declares he has ended DEI and restored excellence and safety in travel. January 23rd, plane crashes in Columbia, California. January 29th, first commercial plane crash in 16 years over Washington, D.C. 67 people die. January 31st, plane crashes in Philadelphia. February 1st, plane crashes in Texas. February 5th, Japan airline planes strike Delta flight on runway in Seattle. February 5th again, plane crashes in Arkansas. February 6th, Bering Air flight disappears over Alaska with 10 people on board, later found dead. But this motherfucker, right? This road rules star wants to talk to us about excellence in air traffic control, because for them, it is, oh, these plane crashes have happened because women and Black people are flying planes. Funny, because, oh, I'll show you what he has said now recently. But let's go back to the list of crashes that have happened. February 10th, plane crashes in Scottsdale, Arizona. February 12th, military fighter jet crashes into San Diego Bay. February 15th, Trump fires hundreds of FAA employees. February 15th, plane crashes in Flagler County, Florida. So look, folks, do you see that on February 15th, how many things happened? Plane crashes in Covington, Georgia. February 16th, 2 planes crash in Texas. February 17th, plane departing from Minnesota crashes in Toronto. Today, February 19th, plane crashes in Marina, Arizona. Just let this sink in for a minute. This entire list, and then listen to Duffy again.
When we had the crash at DCA, it was Joe Biden that allowed helicopters to fly through that airspace, not Donald Trump. We look at what happened in Philadelphia. That plane was inspected under the Biden regime, Biden administration.
So it went from, we're going to blame it on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that doesn't stick, right? Because it doesn't really make sense given the actual facts and stats of who the fucking pilots are. So now, a month in to this administration, Sean Duffy's response to all of the crashes and incidents that we have heard about is now it's Biden's fault. Bitch, Biden's not president anymore. So you went from, we're going to take responsibility and institute projects of excellence, which AKA means white, to now, oops, we're going to blame Biden. These people will not take responsibility for a goddamn thing. You want to talk about people that whine and cry all the fucking time? My God, the white male tears that come out of MAGA world is enough, right, to fill the oceans. Absolutely fucking ridiculous. But only the best people around Donald Trump, only the best people in charge. So because he did the MTV's Road Rule Challenge, that means that he should be the Secretary of Transportation. Like I said, I really enjoy space, so I guess that means I could be a fucking astronaut or run NASA. That is the logic that these people are using. And guess what? It would be funny, except you know what? People are dying. And more people will die. And it won't be because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It will be because of incompetence and fuckery. So before I get out of here today, speaking of diversity, equity, and inclusion, almost a month after Target said it was ending some of its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, the company is facing backlash from customers, the heirs to one of the founders and civil rights activists. I love this for them, truly. This is the response that Target has given after this sustained backlash that they have been receiving. Quote, "For more than 20 years, Target has fueled our business by building teams with diverse perspectives and experiences, creating inclusive work and guest environments that welcome all, and developing strategies that represent the U.S. consumers we serve," Target said. Target has said the company was on track to meet its prior workforce diversity goals and financial commitments to Black suppliers as well. But several top Black Target executives and senior leaders have left the company in recent years, including 3 of the 6 from Target's Executive Racial Equity Committee. I wonder why. Anne and Lucy Dayton, the daughters of one of Target's co-founders, called the company's actions, quote, a betrayal, and said they were, quote, shocked and dismayed by Target's DEI rollback in a letter published last week in the Los Angeles Times. By cowering, Target and others are undermining the very principles that have made their companies a success, said the daughters who were not involved in Target. Target also received nearly triple the number of social media posts about its diversity, equity, and inclusion changes than Walmart, according to an analysis by the Social Element marketing firm. Here's the funny thing. The reason why they've received more backlash than, let's say, a Walmart that has also rolled back their programs is because Target made it a part of their business model to try and attract Black and people of color consumers into their stores, as well as LGBTQ folks into their stores with various programs, various product makers that they had come in during Pride. The whole store was rainbow and LGBTQ, right? Black History Month, same thing. That they had made it a part of their business because unlike Walmart, Target was in more diverse locations. And so they knew who they were catering to. So when you do this reversal, it does feel like a betrayal, because guess what? Walmart never pretended truly to really give a fuck about their Black and brown customers or their queer customers. They never rolled out campaigns. And we're talking about years and years ago, before the 2020 summer uprising, that really sparked a lot of diversity initiatives in corporate America. Target was there. So now, this is something that I find really interesting, and I want to leave it with you all today. The big question is whether the reaction and boycott calls will cause long-term damage to Target like they did to Bud Light, or fade away. In 2023, if you guys all remember, Bud Light's parent company, AB InBev, lost as much as $1.4 billion in sales because of the right-wing backlash to Bud Light's brief partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, right? And one of the key reasons the Bud Light boycott was successful was because it was very easy for customers to substitute with Coors or Miller without much sacrifice. They're like, fuck it. Oh, their Bud Light is woke and I'm going to shoot my Bud Light, because that's what motherfuckers were actually doing on social media. They were buying Bud Light to only shoot the cans. You can't make this shit up. Nonetheless, so the question now remains, is the boycott of Target, right, going to have long-term monetary consequences as it did for Bud Light? Because what the article argues at CNN.com is that the competitors to Target are Walmart and Amazon, which have both rolled back their diversity, equity, and inclusion, making it harder for people to just have that kind of one-to-one switch off. I say, right, then shop fucking local. Yes, the point of boycotts, right, is that there is going to be some pain placed on the consumer, but that there will be more long-term pain placed on the actual corporation. So can you shop at Costco, for instance, that has stood up for their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, right? Can you get your goods from local providers who, by all stretch of the imagination, have been run out of towns and cities? Why? Because of big box corporations that have come in, right? They come in, they're huge, they're able to lower the prices. And so you're not going to shop at your mom and pop that has higher prices. And that's how all of those people go out of fucking business. So can we go back to a more localized mindset? And then for those big items, maybe you go in with family members and friends to go to the Costco's, right, in order to shop. But this, I put that out there today because we will see how it plays out. I didn't even look. Let me take a little look. Curious where Target stock has been, because I've been following everybody's stock for the last couple of weeks just to see. And Target stock price today up. It's back up. It had been down for the last couple of weeks. So again, if there cannot be consistency in boycotting these places and they actually don't see real harm being done, then they know that they can continue to roll back on these initiatives, roll back on their responsibility to consumers, and still get our money. So the key, honestly, is consistency. Oh, friends, so goddamn much. But the last thing that I will say, because I'm just not annoyed enough today. So where have Democrats been is a consistent question that I'm asking. And I'm not talking about the good Dems. We know who they are. So Hakeem Jeffries evidently rolls out new messaging today.
Captain Chaos and the extreme MAGA Republicans spent last year promising to lower the high cost of living and running away from Project 2025 as if it didn't exist.
Captain Chaos. That's what we're working with, Hakeem. That's what we think is going to get the job done. That nickname. Dear God, help us. All right, my friends, let's all take a collective deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. We're going to continue to push through. Continue to push through. Because relying on those MFers to get this job done clearly is not going to lead us anywhere. And it's a lot. We're taking in a lot on a regular basis. So please do continue to take care of yourselves, take care of each other. If you need to tap out, do tap out, but don't tap all the way out. Find ways to work out your fear, your frustration, get that energy out so that you can continue doing the work, because God, there is just so much goddamn work to do. I appreciate every single one of you for showing up today. Thank you so much to all that were able to donate today. Appreciate you. Love you from the bottom of my heart. I will be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern, for the Danielle Moodie Show, as well as our damn call to action. So do be sure to show up 5 p.m. Eastern. And also, friends, if you have not liked, commented, and subscribed, please do so. It really does help me, help the algorithm, and help this channel get into more people's feeds. So if you have not subscribed, do hit subscribe, as well as hitting that little bell that allows you to get alerted for when there is new content that goes up. Appreciate you all so much. As always, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane, and in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. Appreciate you. And thank you so much, Susan, for your moderation today. I know that you were alone and there were lots of trolls. Thank you. Appreciate you always.